which the upcoming story will incorporate quite a bit of. But I am amused somewhat in the idea that I have managed to cut back my drinking quite dramatically. I would go through quite a bit of alcohol. I used to go through, I didn't quite care which powders it was, but I had a great mixture of like 60-40 cocaine to heroin that I was a personal fan of for some time. And I managed to quit that. If you ever want to have the concept of like really hardcore penance for your sins, opiate and cocaine withdrawal, trust me, you just cleared a whole bunch of your fucking slate. I just want to pass that around right now. But one of the things that has been going on is that I have this thing where I can quit smoking. I don't have withdrawal symptoms. What I do have is the habit keeps sneaking up on me, and then the next thing you know, and especially if I'm around a group of smokers, I'm in. I do have to go visit my mom in Albuquerque, who used to be a smoker, did have cancer, and you better believe when I'm over in Albuquerque, don't smoke anything. So when I come back, that's usually my time to sit there and go, no, I'm not bumming cigarettes, I'm not buying anything, we'll just start that whole process. So come November or October, if I'm wandering around and I put on a few extra pounds and I'm constantly sucking on a straw, you know it's working. So we'll see how that goes.
Smoking at the first place.
Yeah, but at the same time, if I do that in front of my mom, if you've ever met my mom, she's about this tall, and she's about the size of, she looks like a fire plug.
We need to have your mom and my mom have a cage match.
Yeah, pretty much. I will point out that my mom almost got court-martialed in the Air Force for busting a pilot's jaw. She is a feisty little Canadian-Irish lady who takes shit from nobody.
Oh yeah, my mom served with Ernie Chambers on the learning community.
Yeah, we'll have that argument later. My mom served during the Vietnam era. It was fairly intense.
Mama!
Yeah, this is the inverse of a dozen. My mom's so tough that.
My mom's so tough she raised me.
Oh yeah? Yeah, just wait, because we're getting to that point. Because that's one of the things I'd like to discuss is one of the things that is coming up. I said on September 15th, it's my birthday. And you have those periods of time in your life where you sit back and you relax and you go, what was I doing X amount of time on my birthday 25 years ago? And then I realized 25 years ago, I was 19 years old, and I was still under the spell of a gentleman that some of you will remember from the Berlin story and from my first ever apartment story named Rob. And Rob kind of introduced me to the world, a much broader world, but at the same time, Rob was not what you would call the most positive influence in a person's life. Now, to start off, some of you don't know, I kind of grew up between two cities in Wisconsin. One is Racine and the other one is Kenosha. And you would one's a city of about 150,000, the other one's a city of about 200,000. And there's about a 5-mile space. I'm going to point this out because that gentleman back there went to the same university that was a mile away from my house. His name is, I'm going to try so hard not to fuck this up, Daniel Grishkowiak. Yes! He is a local filmmaker. We had a great moment of synchronicity as we were talking because he was like, oh yeah, I went to school in Wisconsin. Oh, where'd you go? University of Wisconsin Parkside. Dude, I lived a mile from there and I went there. And we realized we were part of it's going to be like geek night tonight because we were also part of the same geek group, the Parkside Association of Wargamers. And I met him through Barry at Dominicat. That time didn't work out. Who called me up one day and said, I need your help. A friend of mine is shooting a web series, and the timing was perfect because I was in the process of shooting a scene for my web series. And I said, give me 3 hours, I'll be right over. And we ended up shooting a whole bunch of scenes for his web series, which will be coming out later this fall. I just want to pimp it because A, I'm in it. Second of all, he's just a great guy. It's going to be called Space Ale. It's really cool. It'll be comedic and wonderful and really funny and worth checking out. Now then, back to my story. Between Canine and Kenosha, dyslexia, disease of genius. Between Racine and Kenosha, there's about a 5-mile space around 13th Street where there is nothing. And that's where I lived. There was nothing to do. I would go to I would get on my bike and go to the library at the university. And Tomas, when you talk about, being somebody with a 30-year-old sense of humor and you're surrounded by kids, I so feel you. I just want to point that out. My old man was a great, great guy, but he looked like a blonde Hawkeye Pierce. And he was a little bit more sarcastic than that. Would you care to take a guess how often I got my ass kicked in the 5th and 6th grade? Yeah, with that sense of humor, you were in big fucking trouble. So one of the things for me was when I had the opportunity, I was going to go out and I was going to go see the world, and I was going to, do all of this stuff that I kept seeing on television and couldn't do anywhere else. And my initial plan was I was going to join the Army. Well, I made it as far as the MEPS station, and the Army said, "Hi, we just felt your knee. Yeah, good luck with that, and go somewhere else because you're not joining the Army." Okay, so plan B was the University of Wisconsin Parkside. And there I met Rob. There's a whole long story, which I will tell on Saturday, about a trip I did to Berlin with Rob that involved automatic weapons, drugs, lots of money, etc., etc. Needless to say, after that, I had seen quite a bit of the world and I was still excited by it, and I was working for Rob. And I wasn't quite dealing drugs, I was more of a facilitator of these sorts of things. Rob would deal drugs, I would be the guy standing in front of the door saying, "I'm sorry, you can't come in," or more appropriately, "No, fuck off." And when I'm standing in front of a door, putting on my big scary face, and at that point in time, even at 18 years old, I was bigger than most of the people that were going to be coming up to the club door. And at that point in time, I also realized, being something of a firearms fan, and also being a fan of my own personal security, that if you're going to be hanging around people who have drugs and money, you should have a gun. No, let me rephrase that. You should have several guns on your person at all times. Because drugs and money acquired basically draw the wrong sort of crowd. Desperate people who really, really, really want your drugs and money. So I would basically scare them off with the fact that I'm better armed and I'm much larger than you, go away. And then Rob would do his business and then I would get a percentage of the money that he made. You cannot hang out in this sort of strange universe without beginning to indulge in them. Your curiosity will get to you after a while, and that's where that 60-40 mixture comes in. And after a while, one of the things I noticed was that the drugs were interesting because they were an entree, as it were, into a completely different world. I met a whole bunch of different artists, and I met recording, some of the guys. I bumped into some of the guys from the Styx when they were buying Coke and all that. It was kind of cool. I met Jean-Michel Basquiat in passing. If you're not familiar, look him up. It is his name is well worth looking up. Well, on my 19th birthday, Rob was like, "Hey, we're going to go out, we're going to party." And partying with Rob was always interesting. Usually the pre-party was we would sit down, we would drink a little bit, drop a couple of hits of acid, and then we'd go out into the evening. He invited along his friend this time, and any of Rob's friends were always interesting and worth hanging out with, and Rob's friend, his name was Al. Okay, cool. So he's like, "We're going to bring my friend Al along, he's in a band. We're going to go hang out at this club. He's got a single that he wants to hand out." I'm like, "Okay, cool, that'll work." And so we're going along, we're going from club to club, and like Al's dropping off these 12 inches to places, but I didn't get a chance to hear them because by the time the DJ got around to playing them, we had already been and gone and we're moving on to the next place. But as I'm wandering around, and I have to point out, there's a difference in the way drug culture has existed. In the 60s, it was about consciousness expansion. Your brain has never been to this place before. Here, try to take these things and you will see amazing things. In the 70s was like the big, long hangover from the 60s. And it was all about, let's party, let's get wasted, let's just forget about all this horrible shit that's going on around us. The 80s were all about consumption. I keep trying to tell people what the mid-80s were like. It is really hard to make anyone understand the prevalence of cocaine at this point in time. It was like it was everywhere. If you did not have half an ounce in your pocket, you were no one. And everybody had a fucking half ounce, at least in Chicago. If you were in Los Angeles and Miami, I'm sure it was more like, a kilo. But Rob dealt high-grade heroin, and so you can trade that shit for anything. Sexual favors, pharmaceuticals, this, that. You can just get anything with that drug. And so we're hanging around, and I noticed the fact that Al is doing, by my standards, and by this point in time, I am no longer chipping. I have a Jones. I have a full-on habit at this point in time, and Al is going through what I think is absurd amounts of coke and heroin. Like, we're going through grams this evening very, very quickly. He is not making lines, he is making caterpillars. But it's all his shit, and then he's paying Rob for that, so all right, it's all business, but I'm just amazed at the sheer amount of stuff that this guy can do. So Rob's like, excuse me, I was like, hey, we're near my apartment, I need to go grab some more singles, come on up. All right, cool. We go to his apartment, we walk upstairs, and I immediately think, wow, Al is unbalanced. So I walked into his apartment, and all I can think of now, although that album had not come out, was the opening lines from I think it was a Dr. Dre song, Step Inside to the Mind of a Maniac. And I'm looking, and he's made all of this incredible collage art of people with horrible war wounds. And it's all over his apartment. And there's this incredible collection of like pieces of metal that have been made into like art that if you made the mistake of falling somewhere near his wall, you might die. Because it is all jagged and rusty, and you would get an infection or you would cut your head off or something. And so, you know, he's grabbing some singles. He's like, hey, would you like a Bushmills? Yeah, I love Irish whiskey. Go right ahead. So he hands me a bottle of Bushmills. I go to open it, and then I realize he's grabbing one for himself too. Oh, okay. And I look, and he's basically got like a cabinet full of bottles of Bushmills whiskey. Do you know a distributor? What? And he's like, yeah, I know this guy, and I get, you know, a lot of Bushmills. I'm like, okay, great. And so we're walking down the street. 19 years old, carrying several guns, bullets to the eyeballs, walking down the streets of Chicago with an open bottle of Bushmills, drinking like so. I had kind of gotten past that whole Racine Kenosha in the middle of nowhere. That is definitely one of those experiences. And then I realized that Al is crazy because we're going from club to club and we're keeping our bottles. And about after 2 hours, his bottle is down to like a tenth of a bottle, and he sees a cop car, and he yells, "Yo, pig!" And he throws the bottle at the cop car and hits the back window, and it's like an explosion of glass. And all I can think of is, we're going to jail. He's going to go to jail for a little while for breaking this. I'm going to go to jail for a long time because I'm carrying several unregistered firearms and a couple of grams. I am not a person who does a whole lot of cardiovascular exercise. I prefer weightlifting and sparring, to be honest. But all of a sudden, I turned into Jesse Owens. Gone! Long gone! Over the horizon, and Al is trying very, very hard to keep up at this point in time. And so we hit a few more clubs, and finally get a chance to hear Al single. And by this point in time, I was not really what you would call starry-eyed over meeting musicians. I had met quite a few of them, and some of them are jerks, and some of them are cool people. But one of the things in any art form, 95% of any art is shit. Another 4% is shit with an asterisk. And then there's that 1% that makes all the rest of it worth it. And most of the people that produce art, music, or anything else are producing shit. I don't mean to be rude. I too produce a fair amount of shit. Look at the pictures on my Facebook page. Just saying. I have to deal with the fact that I've got a whole bunch of people that I am in a friendly competition with. Mark and Steve Gray and Scott Allen and all these other people that I sit there and go, I've got to up my fucking game. Anyway, back to, they finally get a chance to hear Al single, and there's like these incredibly flanged hi-hat sounds coming on at first, and then this incredibly compressed bass drum, boom, boom, bam, boom, 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 bam, boom. And like the dance floor is getting into it. And prior to this, it is kind of like the early beginnings of techno. It was very kind of like that shiny, happy techno stuff that was going on in the late 80s. It was very much that Manchester sort of take some ecstasy sort of thing and work all of your problems out on the dance floor. And so initially, you think that that's what you're going to get. And then the blood-curdling scream came out of the speakers. And it was like, I can't even do it justice. It sounded like he stabbed somebody in the studio and dropped an SM-58 over his head. was like, and the entire dance floor, it looked like an explosion. People didn't quite know how to react to this. And then, like, you know, the riff comes in and it's got a really great groove, but the vocals are really distorted. And it was everything that I kind of like about music. It's funky, but it's dissonant, and it's all of this. And immediately, like, I'm a fan. I like this. This is cool. I can definitely be into this style of music. Okay, right, Rob, you did a good job of introducing me. All right. We go on, we go out through the evening. The last part of the evening's adventure. I take Al back to his apartment. And I'm going to walk back over to my place. Now, once again, I'm hanging out in the company of somebody who's a fairly well-known dope dealer. And if you're hanging around those sorts of people, people are aware that you know this person. This also means that they think that you're another person who's carrying a vast amount of dope, and I've blown all of mine for the evening, thank you very much. What I didn't, so as I'm walking toward Al's apartment, I'm going to say goodnight, and all of a sudden 2 guys come walking up. Hey man, you got powder? Fuck off, I have nothing, go away. And one of the guys opens up his jacket, and he has this wicked-looking knife in there. He says, no, really, man, you got powder? A little about me. I have 2 black belts. I was trained by a gentleman from the SAS. I will fuck your shit up. And there are certain reactions that I have. If you try to throw a punch at me, I will be nice. I will block it. You will be in an arm bar, but I will not break your arm initially. If you pull a gun on me, I will take the gun away from you. And then we're going to have a little conversation about why you're pulling a weapon. The only weapon that immediately gets a very, very adrenalized, reaction from me that instantly causes me to go straight to training is if somebody pulls a knife. Because I have been shot once and I have been stabbed on several occasions, and I would take getting shot anytime. My stabbings were relatively minor. I was around somebody who almost got effectively disemboweled with a cut. So with that in mind, I always have this horrible reaction if somebody goes to pull a blade on me. I go straight to fear. I get very afraid. Do not, for any moment, think that that's a good thing. Literally, I see the blade, and I have a Beretta over here, which he can see. But that's why I carry several guns, so you can see my big freaking Beretta. On the other hand, over here, I've got a 380 holdout, and it's on his face. I told you, fuck off now. And he is gone across the sky. And I'm like, okay, great, and call it a night. I'm turning around, and I'm looking at Al, and he is just looking at me like his eyes are this big. Like, what? It's like, motherfucker, I thought you were gonna kill that guy. He's like, if he'd moved 1 more inch, I would have. Man, you're heavy. Okay. So, I show Al to his apartment, I go back to my place, and then it is time to crash. Because, all of those drugs in your system, eventually all of this artificial energy wears off, and then your body says, yeah, call it a night, boom, you're done. I usually hasten that because a cocaine crash is fucking horrible, so you take 20 milligrams of Valium and then you don't worry about much of anything after that. It was not until the next year when Al's album came out, and then I didn't realize that the guy that I was hanging out with was Al Jorgensen from Ministry. For those of you not familiar, look them up. They're a super hard, intense, industrial goth band. Hardcore. And Al thinks I'm heavy. To this day, if I could find some way to put that on my resume, God damn it, I'd do it. Thank you all very much. And so, Ellen, we're going to put you off until Saturday, and it will now be the great and mighty Christopher Wigg, who I have, no pressure, been referred to as me with talent. It's become a running gag, so I kind of have some fun with that. Oh, I like that. I'm checking out his notes, and I actually kind of get it, which is cool. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, Christopher Wigg.
I'm actually not anything like you, Dave. I'm not hardcore. In fact,
Oh, it was heavy.
He's heavy. I am heavy. I always enjoy listening to you speak because there is that like action hero side that I've never possessed. I think the one time that I've publicly really stood up to somebody was in a Hy-Vee. If you know me, I wear shorts all year long because I'm fat, and I just radiate heat like a reactor. And I was in line buying my groceries, and this guy turns, and he's actually talking to the cashier who's pointing at me, and he says, "Look at this guy. He's wearing shorts in December in Nebraska. Obviously, he's not from here." And then the clerk proceeds to do that and says, and kind of laughs. And I said, "Oh my God, Doug? Doug, I haven't seen you in a long time." And he says, No, my name's not Doug, it's Jack." And I said, "Oh, so I don't know you and you don't know me? So let's fucking keep it that way." He was like, "Oh, plastic, please," and got his stuff and went away. So it's interesting because I found as the other samurai were telling some stories, I had little side nuggets of things to talk about. Like when Jess was particularly talking about gaming. I am a gaming nerd, but I hide it. Yeah. I remember I was gaming in a giant LARP, and I'll just briefly tell this real quick to move on to the real agenda here. And it was a large game. There was a large campaign of probably about 30 some odd people, and it was a combination of 4 different campaigns that were combined into this one, and they had this freaking awesome end party where they actually threw some money at this thing, and it was fantastic. And there was this giant kind of like scenario set up where the main storyteller was playing the supervillain and blah, 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 and he was a priest, and he set up this whole thing where he was monologuing, essentially, and giving this whole entire speech about his father's house. And I remember my friend and I were baiting him and like, "Come on over here, we'll kick your ass. Come over here." And he said, "No, my son, I'm in my father's house." And just out of my mouth, epically, and I've heard this guy even refer to this many times, I said, "Well, he says, I'm in my father's house and I'm happy." And I said, "Well, that's funny, we just left your mom's house and we're happy too." Everything halted. And about 25 minutes later, we resumed. The laughing is sort of the key element of what I kind of wanted to speak tonight. So I am 36 years old, and last week I lost a friend to cancer who had been battling for about 17 months. And it was a childhood friend of mine that I actually went to grade school, middle school, high school, and then kept even up with in college. And she was this incredibly smart woman who went to University of Boston College and got 2 masters, one in chemistry and one in biology, and then proceeded to law school in Tulane and became a pharmaceutical patent lawyer and went to go live in New York and was incredibly just genius, gorgeous, successful woman who, of course, as this ends, gets cancer. And as my wife says, like, "Well, why can't it happen to the racist idiots?" And I said to her, "Well, it probably does. It's just nobody talks about those jackasses." So what I realized was she was, and I won't pour my heart on this one, but too much, but she was the first person that I had lost in my generation of somebody I knew, which is really, like, if you think about it, statistically very lucky for me that I had gone so many years of not having that. And so the comprehension of loss I was finding very difficult to deal with. Like, I can do a lot of things fairly decent, but this is one of those things that I just really fucking suck at. And it wasn't until a few days ago that I was on stupid Facebook, and I came across one of my best friends, Paige, and he in college, we were college roommates here in Omaha. He took a class, he's lazy. This dude is like epically lazy. And like sometimes so lazy that it actually takes him more work to not do the shit that he should be doing versus just going out and just knocking it out. And so he took this college class on camping, of all things, right? And it's a class. You know, this is Damon. This is Damon Bagley, Damon Donegan. Love this man. And this is what I love about him. So he takes this class on camping, and he says to me, dude, the final is this Friday. And I said, what the fuck is a final? In a camping class. And he's like, well, dude, I was supposed to have gone camping, and I was supposed to have like brought in some photographic evidence. And he's like, you know where I'm going with this? And I said, let's go. So we drove to Indian Cave State Park, and we staged an entire weekend of camping in an hour. And he's got these, and I found myself looking at Facebook, and he uploaded a whole series of old photos, and this one was called like Camping in College. And so I opened this up, and I just, for the term that my mom has destroyed on Facebook, the LOL, she like responds to that for everything, and it always kills me. Is anybody else's parents on Facebook? Yeah, right?
I think so.
Kind of.
Not
Not a Hey.
My parents have specifically said,
Well, some days I think about to go on Facebook too. So I pull up this camping in college, and I realize it's just these photos, and they're fucking hilarious. Now, when you look at them, to anybody that's on the outside, it's not as funny because it actually legitimately looks like this. But then I thought, like, you fucking did none of this. This is completely false. This is awesome. And I found myself just laughing and laughing and laughing. And my wife came in, and she was like, are you okay? And I said, no, I'm actually better than okay. And I realized that, like, with all this heavy-handedness of loss and coping and corporate and raising children and all of these things that just, as I spoke earlier, that corporate vampire, that just bring you down, that sometimes just the simplest of stupidity can escalate you to higher bounds, that you feel free. And I realized that that is part of my success, is broadcasting some of my stupidity to other people so that they can feel free. So I'm going to tell you some of my stupid adventures and some of the stupid things that I've done. So I'm not bold and daring like Dave. I was actually a straight-laced, middle, of the road kind of kid growing up. I had pretty awesome parents. I had things that I wanted, and it was pretty nice. My parents, my senior year in high school, essentially had purchased property about an hour and a half outside of town and just decided we're going to go live there. And so I had a house to myself for the most time, and along with those types of opportunities spawned new friends, right? Yeah, but it actually didn't turn out bad. There wasn't like crazy shit that was going on, footprints on the ceiling, whatever. But I had decided I was going to be bad. And I stole my father's car. Now what you should know is my dad is a gearhead, which I am the total opposite of. And I wish to God I would have had that talent. I wish sometimes that I would have sat with him more and learned that. And I know like enough to be dangerous with like automobiles and the rest of that stuff, but like I know it's like, oh, beyond $200, fuck it, I gotta take it somewhere else. Like changing oil, okay, but I don't do that either. But any of that kind of stuff. So I said, I'm gonna steal his car. Now my dad had a series of wonderful kind of automobiles, and he hand-built one. It was a 1937 Ford that he actually pulled from like the middle of a Nowhereville farm, and built everything by hand, like hand built the engine, hand built everything. It had like no door handles. It had like a secret button that you would click and the thing would open it up and flux capacitor would come down. Just this amazing automobile, and I didn't steal that. But he had a classic Corvette, and I thought, that's it. I'm taking this fucker out. I'm driving this Corvette because he won't let me otherwise. And so I took it out. I never told him about it. About 4 years ago, I was talking to my dad, who thinks I'm the biggest nerd, right? Because I was role-playing in the middle of the field, monologuing about people's moms. So rightfully so, he should think that.
When a vampire larp and running.
Yeah, when I left the house, probably wearing mascara or some shit. I wonder why he thinks that. So, anyways, I was telling him, I said, hey, did you know that I actually stole your car once? And this amazing sense of pride came over his face. And he looked at me and he was like, you what? And I said, yeah. Now mind you, this car was not even kept on premise. I had to go like a few blocks away where he rented a garage from this other lady and like get past her, and like my friend and I took it out, and he was like, that's insane. I would have never thought that about you. And he looked so proud that I had done this. And he says, what did you do? And I said, we went and got groceries at Hy-Vee. That pride washed away. True story. We took it right back. It actually had more gas in it than when I originally took it. When I was in the junior high, probably 9th grade, high school, that area, a friend of mine had gotten his hands on a copy of the Anarchist cookbook. Ooh, right?
You get all online now anyway.
I know, right? Before that was a big deal. There was like this urban legend, like if you get it, the FBI puts you on a list and they're gonna watch your house and burn your family. But it didn't.
Lobbyists, man.
Yep. Didn't happen. So he got this book, and he got into this phase of explosives, and he had obtained a great amount of, and I'm not probably saying this correct, but I'll take a stab at it. It's formulated mercury, which is what they put in like those snap pops when you throw on the ground. Which, if you have like in small doses, that's not such a big deal, right? So to give you an idea about this, I'm on the phone with him. Like a sandwich bag? Try a popcorn bowl. So I'm on the phone with him and he's talking, and this really isn't my story to tell, but I'll go ahead and tell it from my perspective. I hear he's saying like, oh yeah, class today, this was crazy and we did this, and can you believe that girl said this, ha ha ha. Bunch of nonsense junior high dialogue on a phone. And I hear this like sound like sand being dropped. And I said, what in the hell are you doing? He said, oh yeah, I'm taking that formulated mercury and I'm putting it into this bowl. It's really cool because as I drop some of it, I can see little clouds that almost look like mushrooms. And the sound just goes off. And I hear for 3 minutes straight, that thing exploded in his face. Now, mind you, the phone, God bless the technology, when the sound went through, it's designed that it won't allow a certain decibel to come and explode in my ear. Like if you took a car horn or one of those foghorns and rang it on somebody, it's not going to really deafen them because your phone shortens it. So it didn't sound as bad to me. He had popcorn bowl pieces in his face and found it in like rooms away. And then of course, as anybody in that age is like, well, I can't tell my parents. So for 3 weeks in the one ear, just, and he totally faked it. So that guy He made himself a bomb. Now, mind you that I've just given you the wisdom of what has happened. He had taken some black powder and wrapped it super tight and put shrapnel in it. And, you know, shrapnel makes sense. And had said, we'll light this later or whatever. Well then, like, something had pulled on him, and he called me up and he said, no, that's a terrible idea. We shouldn't do that at all. And what I would like you to do is, could you extract the powder from the bomb, and then I'll just deal with that other shit later. And I said, yeah, of course, of course. So a friend of mine, it's in Nebraska, January, December, and it was freezing cold, are out in my back alley. And we're huddled up, and I'm carving this thing and draining the powder that goes into it. And I feel like we've drained the most of it. And my friend says, dude, check this shit out. Oh. Which follows, yes, exactly, you all know what's happening here. He takes his lighter, and he lights the side of it, and it fizzles like a black cat when you break it to the side, right? My adolescent brain says, that's excellent. And he's like, oh yeah, yeah, and kind of turns it over. He says, light, light, light. Dude, it's too windy. Huddle closer. I said, yeah, that's a brilliant idea. So I do. We get super close. He says, light, light. I suddenly felt this concussive force and saw sparkles of angels crying. As I was flung to the ground, I couldn't feel my face, third grade. I couldn't see, I couldn't hear, and everything was numb. And I thought, I've died, and purgatory or hell is just a gray area that smells like sulfur. As the smoke began to clear, and as I stood up, and I shit you not, I could really kind of exaggerate this. This is not an exaggeration. He looks at me, I look at him, and I said, hey, Sean. He says, yeah. I said, put your eyebrow out. He goes, now he was wearing a jean jacket, as was his way, because he was a Hessian. The jacket had an illustration of a blast radius that was there, like it was tie-dyed. Fucking epic. We smelled horrendous. It was like a combination of black powder and failure. And I kept thinking, they're going to know this has happened. My parents, we're going to have to answer to this, let's just live in the alley. Let's just take the rest of this bomb and actually kill ourselves so that I don't have to face the consequences that are going to happen. So we rolled in the snow for hours, laughing hysterically and trying to get that smell of the failure off of us. And we did, we got away with it. And of course, probably not so much now because my mom watches these. To which I will expect she will lol my Facebook page. So I have two more little anecdotes for you tonight, if you have the time. My first is, I have to be a little mysterious on my description of this because I don't want to out somebody. But I had a coworker who she was really hardcore. I think she could probably take you in a fight, Dave. She once, on my first day at work, at my current job, threatened to cut my face because I asked for a different selection of soda. She is really hardcore. She no longer works there. I wonder why. And in that time that I kind of whittled her down with a little bit of my humor, and her and I got along fairly well. And it was a little bit of time after she left the company that I didn't see her, and I ran into her at fucking Hy-Vee. What is with me in promoting Hy-Vee? Helpful smile. And I ran into her at Hy-Vee. Now, mind you, these other friends of mine, every Tuesday we used to have dinner, and it was a thing where either I would bring the stuff and then make the dinner at their house, or they would have dinner prepared at their house, but it was always at their house. And it was one of those moments where I left my work after having taken some sort of phone call that I shouldn't have taken and writing some email that I shouldn't have written, and I was super behind and running there, and I was just not in the mindset. And when I arrived, I saw this person, and sometimes when you see people out of context, it takes you a second to figure out who they are, even though you know them really well. And I was thinking about all this other shit that I was supposed to do, and she says, hey, I just wanted to talk to you. How are things going? How's the work? How's this? How's that? Oh, have you met my wife? And she's like, yeah, that's right. I'm gay. And out of my mouth comes the most absurd statement. What didn't come out of my mouth was I didn't say, yeah, so, or great, or I support your community actively by doing this, or I help start a theater program for teenagers who are, or I walk in the parade every year, or do you want to see my rainbow card, straight but not narrow? All that comes out of my mouth is, I love the gays. I'm going to leave that one right there. Just as that is.
That's all you can do.
That's all I can do. Thanks. She actually, about 6 months later, I ran into her, and she was really cool. And she forgave my stupidity at that moment and was like, oh, hey, you remember my wife so-and-so? Remember? He loves us. And I do. My last story that I will leave you was I was working at a company called giftcertificates.com, and I worked, before I started my fraud life, I'm a fraud analyst. I run a risk operations department for a social networking company now. See, that doesn't sound fun. Nobody says they want to do that when they grow up. I'm a fucking astronaut. So before I was an astronaut, I worked at a place called giftcertificates.suck. And at Gift Certificates, before I got into fraud, investigating, not committing, I was I was working in a shitty place called Fulfillment, where you basically would scan some shit, put it in an envelope, and put it into the mail. Sweet.
That sounds really fulfilling.
Thank you. And so I was doing that, and they had this thing where they had potential investors or other vendors or whoever that they would walk through the building, and they had this shtick down to a science where they would say, like, well, here's the vault, and here's what they do here, and over here's their customer service, and here's Chris. Hey, Chris, why don't you tell them a little bit about what we do here? And then, like, my boss would leave, and then this victim would have to stand there and listen to my shenanigans, which I had gotten down to about a cool, like, 4.5 minutes, and then he would come back, and like, okay, great, thanks, Chris, and then walk them away. So that particular day, we had a representative from a wonderful company called AMC Movie Theaters. And it was this very attractive girl who was very nice and seemed very cool. And she comes over to this desk, to my desk, and she seems kind of like all of a sudden 180 and is kind of weird, has this really disturbed look on her face, and then as I'm talking, I'm thinking like, no, I did shower, and I don't smell, and I don't know, okay, well, whatever, and I just continued to talk and whatever, and then my boss comes by and she was like, well, thank you, thanks for your time, and kind of like walked away a little stunned, and I thought, God, that's just fucking weird, I don't understand. About 5 minutes later, I got up from my desk to leave when I realized I was completely unzipped and had a boxer malfunction that I was out. I was out. So, at giftcertificates.wang, I showed my junk to one of the vendors. I will say this. We did get the business. However, I will also say I am a card-carrying member of their loyalty program, which is also called the Stubbs program. Ouch. Thank you very much for coming out and supporting local, and thank you for coming and seeing us. I hope you had a wonderful time.
Did I point out he was getting a showcase set on the 24th? Yeah, it is going to be worth seeing, trust me. Well, much like he said, thank you all very much. Thank you for coming out. Some of you are going to be getting up and going home because you have to go to work very early in the morning. I'm Art. And with that in mind, there's also those of you who will not. I don't know if we're heading to Rubber Dick Storks tonight, but I'm reasonably certain that a couple of us will be stopping by Beercade for a drink and catch the second show after this. So thank you all very much and have a great evening.